Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure on behalf of MIT Sloan School of Management to welcome you to today's presentation. It's a great honor and a great joy to be able to introduce the former Prime Minister of Haiti, Laurent Lamothe, who is here with us. Minister Lamothe served as Prime Minister of Haiti from 2012 to 2014. He had an extraordinary challenge, as you all know, and a record of achievement during that time. Among those elements of achievement was an aggressive social policy agenda focused on the poorest citizens in the country of Haiti, and also an extraordinary set of projects around infrastructure and economic redevelopment. I'm also proud on behalf of MIT that during his time as Prime Minister, we were able to launch the MIT Haiti initiative together, where a number of our faculty from MIT worked hard to try to make a positive contribution, and we hope did make a positive contribution to the country's present and future. Among the elements of the MIT Haiti initiative were work related to leadership development and team building, including among the country's leadership, and especially, again, around issues of economic regeneration for Haiti. There was also important activity between MIT and Haiti around the themes of coupling the language, Haitian Creole, making it more available to young people in the country, including through online learning, what is seen as an important dialogue and development in the country's educational system. In 2014, Latin Trade magazine named Minister Laurent as the year's innovative leader of the Americas. We are very glad to call him a friend of MIT. He has a bachelor's degree in political science from Barry University and an MBA degree from St. Thomas University. Would you please give a very warm MIT welcome to Minister Lamothe.
Thank you very much, Dean, and I want to thank all the students for being here today. I want to thank Michel DeGraff. I want to thank Deborah for being great friends of Haiti and for supporting the poorest people of my beloved country. You are great friends, and I urge you to continue your tireless work on behalf of the Creole speakers of Haiti. We'll talk about that a little bit further. But I want to tell you how much I appreciate being here today. It's a great honor. I've been in Sciences Po in Paris, and I'm here today. I'm going to be in Cornell in 2 weeks and then Harvard in June. So I'm touring the United States and Europe to talk about my experiences as a former Prime Minister of Haiti, what I've learned and what I can contribute also as we move forward with the developing nations and how to better assist and help and work together to bring developing countries on the forefront of development. So I want to tell you a little bit about me, about my background. So as the Dean said, I have an MBA in management and a bachelor's in political science. I wanted to make a difference in Haiti. I wanted to do things better. And after I did my political science degree, I realized that I couldn't get a job. So I said, I'm going to push it further and go for the MBA. I did the MBA in management. And then I had always the entrepreneurial spirit and wanting to always find out more and do more and push the envelope. So I opened a company with a $5,000 grant from my father. We started in my brother's home. He had a garage, so we started there. And in 10 years, it became one of the largest telecommunication companies in Africa and the Caribbean, having sales of over $350 million. Then I was in Florida watching CNN, and seeing one of the greatest catastrophes. And I don't know if you all remembered Anderson Cooper reporting live from Haiti on this devastating earthquake in January 12 of 2010. And that earthquake really changed things for me. When I was seeing the devastation, when I was seeing the hurt, when I was seeing the suffering, I had a calling that said, I have to do something about it. I have to do something, which I didn't know what at the time. And a few months later, my friend Michel Martelly came over to my house and said, Laurent, we have to do something, and I want you to support me in what I'm about to tell you. And I said, what? And we were good friends. And he says, I want to run for president of Haiti, and I want to make a difference. We thought about it, and we said, you know, let's take the chance, let's go for it. We had no funding. We had no political party. We just had a dream. We had a dream to make the country a better place and to represent the most vulnerable of Haitians, those that have never had any government supporting them, leading them, and showing them a better way and giving them hope. And representing the 2 million Haitians that are living outside of Haiti and that have a great love for the country. So we wanted to make things different. And of course, the president won the election and became president in May of 2011. And I was his advisor then. I became foreign minister for 4 months and then prime minister for 31 months. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the challenges that I faced as the country's prime minister, and especially as the advisor of the president. Because when the election results were given, and it was read on national TV, and everybody, there was an incredible suspense and people, you know, an incredibly tense situation. And the announcer from the Electoral Council came and he said, Michel Martelly has 68% of the votes and is the new president. Everybody, you know, screamed in joy and was extremely excited and happy, and, you know, that we have a new leadership. And then he looks at me and he says, we have a problem. That means that all the promises, you have to make them happen. I said, me? He said, well, us. So we worked together in doing it. And the first promise was to give free education for all with no budget. So that was the first challenge that we had to meet. Putting 2.5 million children in school for free while we have no budget. So, and we had 15 days to do it, by the way. Seems like a mission impossible. And a lot of things that we did could be considered as mission impossible. So very quickly, and Deborah asked me to go into, you know, what the contribution that I've personally, my personal experience. So what we did is we had no budget, we had a goal, we had the objective, we had the will to do it, we had a lot of support. Now we had to deliver, and we had to make it happen. So we implemented a surcharge because it cost about $90 per student. And we focused first on the primary students. There was about 1.5 million of the country's of the poorest of the poor. I mean, the Haiti's GDP is $750 per year, and the average family has 4 children, and the regular cost of tuition is $250 per year per child. So that tells you that all of their income, you know, goes into the tuition. And that's why we had about 600,000 students could not afford paying that $250 a year. That might seem very little here, but it's a lot in the country of Haiti. So we very quickly put up a policy of identifying new sources of revenues potential in order to pay for the children's school. You're seeing a video here that shows a lot of the realizations that happened, and there was many of them, so you will have a chance to see it. But I just want to state that the biggest challenge was the education challenge and providing scholarships for children that needed it the most. So we put in a $1.50 surcharge on the wire transfers going to Haiti from across the world. So, somebody would send a Western Union to Haiti. There was $1.50 that was surcharged to go and pay for the children's education. And there was a 5-cent surcharge put in on every minute of every phone call. In Haiti, having a large diaspora, that amounted to about $40 million a year of new revenues in order that were directed to paying for scholarships for children. So we went from having almost no students attending school for free, with the parents having to pay, and the parents having no means to pay, to today having a program where we have about 1.4 million children that are benefiting from that scholarship. And that single policy increased the attendance, according to the latest UNICEF numbers, from 55 to 90% attendance in the primary school system of Haiti. And in an innovative way, we managed to do what many thought was impossible, and making a difference in the everyday and in the most vulnerable of the Haitians' lives. So that was the first challenge. The second challenge that we had to deal with was rebuilding a country that was devastated by an earthquake. And to give you an idea, the government collapsed. There was all the 42 office buildings, public office buildings had collapsed. We had 50% of the residents of Port-au-Prince, they were left, their homes had collapsed, and they were living homeless in the middle of the streets in tents. So the scene was, we had hundreds of camps of displaced people, people that had lost family members, that had lost friends, and that were left really disoriented and completely in search, of just surviving. So that was what we had to deal with the first day in office. And today, we put together a program called 16-6, and that program basically identified, rebuild homes that were destroyed, leveraged the international community's aid to Haiti, and put about $100 million into relocation and fixing home building and giving a rental subsidy for a year for everybody to be relocated. So today, out of the 1.5 million people that were living homeless on the street, that number is down to 30,000. So, and the camps have largely disappeared based on just good management, and determination to succeed. That was one of the, I would say, the toughest program, because imagine, people just homeless on the streets, and then having to put them back in a home. That was an incredible challenge, one that we met. The second challenge, of course, was to rebuild the infrastructure of the country, rebuild the Haitian confidence, rebuild the minds, rebuild the trust in government. So right now, we're in the process, until I left in December, of rebuilding the actual physical buildings of the administration in order to work. Because when I got in my first day as Prime Minister, one of my immediate business was to get a printer. because as I was tasked of this incredible challenge, there was no printer, there was no computer in the office. So that was actually, I had to start from there. And from there, work my way in a very dedicated manner to rebuild an entire country. So that was certainly a huge undertaking. Now, we needed to move forward, and as you rebuild a country, you rebuild the infrastructure and everything else, but whatever you do, of course, needs to be sustainable. And after the earthquake, Haiti, before the earthquake, we had very little means, and after the earthquake, we had even less. Why? Because we had a $1.2 billion debt to the international institutions, which was wiped out. So we had zero debt. But the only problem is we could not borrow anything. We couldn't borrow from the private sector. We couldn't borrow from the international institutions. So we were stuck with grants from the World Bank and the IDB. So we had $15 billion in work to do, and we only had about $300 million on hand in order to carry out that work. So we had a deficit of $14.7 billion, to start with. So what we decided to do is four things. One is to refocus and re-engage the international donor institutions into having a country-led and country-owned strategy by developing a plan that would make Haiti an emerging country in 2030 and focusing on the greatest need areas for the grants. A lot of the projects that you're seeing on the movie is tourism, and I'll get to that in a second, is tourism development as a sustainable way to create jobs and rebrand the image of the country. And you seeing this Île à Vache, it's one of the destinations that we promoted to rebrand Haiti and making it a destination where everybody can go. But we wanted to, we as a government, we did not want to continue being on handouts. Because you have to understand that as a country to do better, we need investments. And we need to create an atmosphere and an environment for investors to come. So the strategy was built on first shoring up the security of the country. We had a police force of about 8,000 officers for 10 million people. So that's probably much smaller than the Boston police department. But then we were tasked to carry out security for the whole country. So we added 4,000 officers. We had a partnership with the New York Police Department to add a unit for community policing. We added a touristic police, a tourist police corps, so that when you all went, you would feel safe and protected. And we wanted to have an environment where investors feel that they can come in. The earthquake had destroyed all the hotels of the country, and we had to convince hoteliers to give Haiti a chance to come back. Today, we have something that we've never had in the past. We have 5 international hotels, and that was in 2.5 years. And the Marriott Hotel opened 2 months ago. And it's the first time in the history of the country that there is a Marriott. That's very beautiful, and I encourage you all to, when you visit. And when I talk about the Marriott, a lot of you here, because you have, as I was on TripAdvisor yesterday coming here, I see that, you have 600 or 700 hotels. It comes as second nature. It comes as a normal thing. But you have to understand that after the earthquake, we had nothing, not one hotel. I mean, people were sleeping in friends' yards under tents. And that's where we had to come to be where we are today. So having the Marriott was a significant advance. And we have the 4 other hotels that are doing very well. And the country really has the accommodation, the lodging capacity in order to get the investors. So it's having the lodging is part of is one segment of a larger scale plan in order to put the country back on the scale. Then we needed to advertise internationally that you can visit Haiti, it's safe. So we had a very aggressive social media campaign, and billboards, and focus mostly on the Haitians living in the diaspora, so the Haitians living here to come back home and to give Haiti a chance in order to diversify the source of revenue for the state, which today are only two sources. It's the customs and the taxes, and that's it. So the tourism is one where the government that I led focused a great attention on, and we wanted to rebrand the country because we understand that, for example, a country like Jamaica or the Dominican Republic that are great tourist destinations, a lot of it is they have areas that are better than others. And the same thing for Haiti. When you spoke about Haiti, you only heard about the bad. We wanted to do it different. We wanted to talk about the good. And pictures that you're seeing here is what we mean when we say about the good. The only thing is, it was not well marketed. It wasn't talked about, enough. So we decided to focus on 3 main destination areas and promote them and invest in them. And what we did is we took the satellite islands around Haiti and invested there. One of them there is an airport being built, airport, marina, seaport, and public-private partnership. We're gonna discuss that more as a means of development. When a country does not have its own means, you can partner not only with governments but with private sector of foreign countries in order to bring development. And that's how it's done in the United States and everywhere else. But in Haiti, it was not yet practiced. So that's one area that we significantly pushed. And we have a lot of traction, a lot of interest. And of course, the fight on corruption, which is a big issue in foreign investors coming into, because of local regulation, to invest in countries. So it was a great challenge for my government to put in the first ever anti-corruption law, and one that criminalizes corruption acts. Because the law that was there before was very soft on corruption. So my government passed one of the most comprehensive anti-corruption laws ever in the history of the country, and one that made us gain 11 points in the corruption index. It's still bad, but it's better than what it was before in terms of the corruption index. And of course, to fight corruption, you need to improve the living standard of the population, improve pay in the public administration, and a whole set of series of things in order to completely eradicate or solve the problems. And this is what we were on the course of doing. Having led a country, managed the country, it's very similar to running a large enterprise. Budgeting, planning, your marketing strategy, your human capital, the strategy. But of course, you do it for 10 million people, which that was my case. And of course, you have the pressure of your decision affecting the lives of every single citizen. And failing, you fail not only yourself, in case you have if you're an entrepreneur, you fail yourself or your management team or your shareholders, but there you fail an entire population, and it can cost lives. So that's why the decision has to be well studied, well researched, and it has to be taken in a way that benefits, and that has to be taken with the community interest at heart. And that's always very difficult in government because you have special interest groups, you have a bunch of lobbyists that are trying to influence the decision. But of course, one of the trademarks of a good manager is listening, but ultimately is to make a decision that is good in your heart. That is good in your heart, that you're doing the best that you can. And that's all they can ask of you. So we took the country from complete devastation to today. We have 4 airports. We had one airport in 211 years. That airport was destroyed during the earthquake. It was rebuilt. And we have 3 more airports being built around the country to develop and give access to the outer world to the nicest part of Haiti. We have 2 new seaports being built. There's the new hotels. There is about 1,000 kilometers of roads. The country that I left was one of the safest in the Caribbean. We were ranked 5th in terms of security in the Caribbean. The corruption index improved. The economy was moving. The economy grew 4.3% in 2013 and 2.8%. So we had the indicators were in green. The local production was increasing. So at the end of the day, the country that we left was a much better place than the country that we found. And I'm sure a lot of you are going to ask me, so, okay, why did you resign? So why are you no longer the prime minister? Unfortunately, in many of the developing countries, when you make decisions that are good for the greater community, and especially the most vulnerable, you are the constant target of special interest groups and groups that have their own interest in mind. And then we needed to make a greater compromise to bring in the opposition members within the government in order to go to elections this year. So the president made a decision to include and give up half of the government, including the post of prime minister, to the opposition parties to have a consensus type of government. So then, he and we agreed that I would step down to allow the country, as part of this grand compromise, to allow, the opposition to feel that, look, they're involved in the process and then go to elections, which are going to happen at the end of this year. So there is many lessons learned, and I'm going to, open it up to questions from you. But in terms of a management sense, we are in the MIT Sloan School of Management. Managing a country is very similar and has a lot of the core values of managing an enterprise and having the entrepreneurial spirit. Because at the end of the day, you want to make the best possible decisions for the greatest good or for the greatest amount of citizens. And this is what drove me as a manager and drives me today as I'm giving you this lecture and talking to you about the experiences that I've made as the Prime Minister of Haiti. So, having said that, I'm open for questions.
I'll go first. My family's over here. My family, should I stand up?
Yeah, that's great.
My name is Alan Christophe. I'm a second year at MIT Sloan. My family's from Haiti too, but I'm a first generation Haitian American. Great presentation, by the way. I had a couple of questions. It sounded like a lot of your solutions were quick fixes. I mean, you had to after the devastating earthquake. But my question's more about long term and what you're going to do to more or less bring the Haitians in diaspora to bring their economic power back to the country, and more importantly, to create policies where you're trading more in the West. The founder of Singapore, who just passed away, I think his initials were LKY, a lot of what he did was really ensuring long-term growth to the detriment of the short term. But he did a lot of international youth exchanges, and more importantly, he required English to be a primary language within the country just to start trading, right? Because we have a demographic in Haiti that's extremely young, and a lot of it is they don't have nothing to do, and the the exchange of ideas from other countries, specifically developed countries, isn't happening. And I kind of want to know what you're going to do to address that.
Well, excellent question. I have to tell you that I'm no longer the prime minister. So I'm going to talk about what I did for 31 months and we'll let the new prime minister, the opportunity to work on that. But the Singapore development model is a very good model, and one that we looked at, and of course one that took basically a very charismatic leader, a visionary, to lead the country, and one to lead the country to where it's at today. I mean, Singapore is one of the leading economies of the world, and okay, so the context that we took over was an extreme emergency type of situation. One where, as I said, it was Armageddon. We took it from an Armageddon-like state to bring it in 2 years to where it's at today. So there is, in terms of the long-term approach, we had the strategic development plan of Haiti that called for Haiti to be an emerging country by 2030, and having basically different strategies for different sectors. For example, job creation, opening the economy to investors, changing the laws of the country. But everything starts and ends, of course, with security. Because your first question is how to get Haitians such as you to come back to Haiti. When you finish graduating from MIT, we would love you to have you back. Because one of the biggest, and I didn't mention that, one of the challenges was not only did we have to do development on a shoestring and rebuild the country with very little budget, we have the world's highest brain drain ratio. 85% of the brains of Haitians, they're abroad. They're in the United States, they're in Canada, they're in Europe, but they're not in Haiti. So we were left with only 15% of the human capital to lead the country. Now, we had an exchange program and a program to get Haitians back, and we did it with USAID in order to match some of the pay scales, because at the end of the day, it's entrepreneurship and it's risk-taking. Now we as the government had created, a secure environment for you to come in, but the government didn't have enough reach, if you want, to carry out all the policies to, if you want, have Haitians to come back to Haiti, simply because of a pay scale. I mean, we are restricted, being the government, we're very restricted with pay scales. So if I would tell you to come and work in Haiti, although you love your country, yet the salary, the maximum salary that you can earn, if you want to work, of course, for the public administration, because the salary of the president is $60,000 a year. The salary of the prime minister is $48,000 a year. The salary of a minister is $30,000 a year. So if you, who's a bright, young Haitian brain, you finish, you get your degree from MIT, and then you come and work, you're going to earn no more than $18,000 a year. And I cannot force you to come for that. And this is the biggest challenge that we've had, because we only produce 30% of our budget. The rest is financed by international institutions. So it takes, and there is an urgent need to diversify the source of revenues of the country, to go into tourism, to show the world what we have to offer, to give a different story than the story that's being said in the media about Haiti. So, and it's going to take a long time. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I think that it's necessary for Haitians that have studied abroad and that are wanting to go back also go back with the entrepreneurial spirit. And the entrepreneurial spirit means risk-taking. And that's what I encourage people to come back. The government was open to work, but we have this issue with the salary. But then in the private sector, there is no issue. So you can develop ideas and go and contribute. Like John F. Kennedy said, don't ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And this is what I urge all Haitians living abroad to do. What can you do for the country now? As we've done what we could in the time that we could do it.
Thank you for your great presentation. It was really lovely, and I like the marketing part of what you do. That's where my heart lies. I have a question. I mean, you talk about Haiti being now a remittance society, and I remember back when I was born and Duvalier was in power. 100% of the food that was consumed by the country was produced by the country. What part of your program, I know it was short 30 months, actually addressed any agricultural changes to get Haitians back working on the land and producing their own food? Again, your presentation is great. You were a great prime minister. I'm just kind of curious what you started in that field, because I didn't see anything.
Thank you. 65% of the jobs, they're agriculture-related jobs. So when in the 90s, there was an extreme liberalization of every sector. There was tariffs and local food production that was, if you want, put aside. And that created massive job losses that we've seen and that we've experienced. So what we did was threefold. One, we developed for the first time ever a social assistance and social solidarity program that purchased from small local farmers. So their production would be guaranteed. And the time that we were there, the rice production increased by 18%. But we needed to do much more. We needed to create, because the consumption is about 40,000 tons of rice per month. So we only produce about 8,000 and we import 32,000. In order to do so, you have to be competitive. So one of the strategies that we have was supporting cooperative and small farmer associations to unite and then produce together and finding markets for them. So we found two markets. One is the local market, government-sponsored community restaurants, government-sponsored programs. All this was part of the strategy that we built. Also, putting the farmer associations together in the Northeast to plant plantains and finding markets abroad for them. And that's a very successful venture, which the government banks also helped finance, and that gave tremendous results. And that's a model that we want to replicate, all over the country. Agriculture, agribusiness, side of the industry, we strongly pushed and promoted that, the conservation, irrigation. So it's a very wide sector. The agriculture, especially for small farmers, because right now we wanted to take it from a subsistence survival type of agriculture to one where we could focus on niche markets locally and niche markets internationally. So a lot of, for example, the Haitian mango, which is one of the best mangoes certainly in the world. Those of you who haven't tried it and who like mango, I urge you to try the Haitian mango, for example. We facilitated and promoted their relationships with specialty stores in the United States. For example, Whole Foods. If you go to Whole Foods now, you will find the Haitian mango. And you will find some other, for example, Haitian coffee. All those. But, you have to understand that because of For example, the short period of time and the lack of access to capital and financing for the agriculture, the small farmers, it was a great challenge. Now, we put together a plan to have financing for the small farmers and the agricultural of peasants around the country. Because right now the portfolio of lending is, I would say, almost all of the financing are commercial. There's only 1% financing that go to agriculture, when 65% of jobs are agricultural related jobs. So that trend needs to be shifted, and definitely more needs to be done into grouping the land, grouping the cooperative, and working and finding the markets and finding more markets. But with Whole Foods, with the Clinton Foundation, is doing a lot of work in that. Local coffee growers associations, mangoes. There is a lot being done right now to push the agriculture, and agriculture production itself generally had increased 5% in 2014. So there is an upward trend that was commendable.
Okay, my name is Patrick Lucian, and I'm actually from Haiti, and I just wanted to reemphasize what the Prime Minister just said about diaspora going back in Haiti, because I see myself as a living example of what needs to be some of the things that we're doing. So I grew up in Haiti, left Haiti in the mid-'80s, went to high school and came here and became an engineer. And 10 years ago, I started going back to Haiti, and especially Hilavash, that the Prime Minister mentioned. So as an engineer and somebody who worked in the private sector here, I started with a small resort of 3 rooms, and now it had become 10 rooms where we employ 10 people on the island, and they have full-time jobs. I started a microfinance program with a fund donated by actually Phillips Academy here in Andover, and there are 80 women starting their own businesses. And we just finished an entrepreneurial program training to those women, and we started a hot sauce called Flam, and now we're kicking Tabasco out of the island, and that's the main goal. And we started a bakery that employs 7 people and 22 resellers. We also have a school that we started back in 2005 with just 23 kids. In fact, a friend of the Prime Minister, Ms. Petra, is helping us rebuild the school. So there is nothing wrong then. I don't think it's that difficult if we go back and use our own resources. Just like institutions like MIT goes and recruit their alumni to go back and support the school through endowment, I think we can go back and look for our own resources, just like we mentioned that 85% of the brain of the Haiti is outside of the country. We can go back and recruit those. And I'm not just doing this as a charity, because I think for me it's a path to retirement. If you want to go back, go rebuild that community just like we're building our country here. Go rebuild the community where you want to live, and then build resources for yourself, and you can have and enjoy good living. It's not just about doing charity, you're doing it for yourself, and at the same time, you're doing it for the country. So I invite those that are Haitians who think that is difficult. I don't think it's that difficult. Find a community, go there, get to know the people, and you realize that you will find very good people that you can work with, and then work with people that you can make a difference. Thank you.
And that's what I'm talking about the entrepreneurial spirit and taking risks. I mean, you started with 3 rooms, now you have 10 rooms, and I can guarantee you, if the development keeps going, you're gonna have to go to 50 rooms very soon. So it's all about taking risks, and it's about learning and applying what you learn in school, in the real world, and believing in your idea, believing in your dreams. I mean, when I was Prime Minister, I had a dream. I gave a quick glimpse of what things could be. But at the end, it's all about believing in your dream and your idea. And it's about believing that no matter what the obstacle, you will wake up every day and do the best that you can to reach your goal. And that nobody can take it away from you. So those of you here, of course, I'm gonna do something I'm not supposed to. Now that I took all the questions from the diaspora, I want to have like the non-brothers and sisters from Haiti ask me some of the question. But again, I urge the diaspora, I don't like the word diaspora. I prefer to say the Haitians that are living abroad, because there is no difference. It's just a change of address. It's a different address. But after that, all of the Haitians that are here, I'm sure when you wake up every day, you think of Haiti. Every day. Yes. Especially in the winter. So I'm told that I brought the sun with me because it's a beautiful day. So I'm happy that I made a small contribution to.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My name is Carter Atlamazoglu. I'm in the Sloan Fellows program here. You discussed a little bit about the anti-corruption law you passed when you were Prime Minister. I was wondering if you could discuss a little bit more broadly any anti-corruption measures you took, and what lessons you learned from that, how effective they were, and any lessons, any recommendations to address corruption not only in Haiti but also in other countries where corruption may be endemic.
Yes. So besides the law that was passed, we also increased the size of the anti-corruption unit by 40%. We added officers. We added, vehicles to their fleet. All the support that the anti-corruption unit needed was provided to them. We also started a cooperation program with the U.S. To have, anti-corruption training for the officers, and working very closely with Transparency International. They came to actually a council of ministers to talk about, basically the global implication of corruption, just to sensibilize, just to bring awareness to the group of leaders, that were in the room, and also putting them in a situation that they understand the repercussion of corruption-related acts. Other than that, there was about 72 arrests corruption-related, especially in the education program, because as you do massive government programs, people are going to try to trick the system. So there was about 72 arrests during my tenure there. And at the end, what's very important is to understand that the corruption is not only true in developing countries, because you hear cases, at the highest level in large countries. So what needs to be done is a lot of awareness programs, making people understand that it's not right, that corruption acts are not right, that stealing the people's money is not what they're here for. But at the end, there needs to be, on the other hand, there needs to be a compensation done by the public servant in terms of salary in order to make corruption less attractive. Because I was reading, for example, that the salary of the president of the University of Pennsylvania, for example, is $2.5 million. Okay? Now, the salary for the head of the customs service of Haiti, which brings in $500 million per year, his salary is $800 a month. So this all, it makes it, very difficult with such low salaries to prevent, if you say, a corruption or a bribe here and there because of the low pay. Now, the low pay comes from the general economy that, Haiti doesn't finance its own budget. So it comes from a general economic situation that has to be taken into context in order to increase pay for the more at-risk public servants. That would, generally reduce the cases. And awareness, training, education, and also respecting the rule of law. I think, globally, it's one where, we will see corruptive acts reduce.
So my name is Haynes Miller. I'm a professor of mathematics here at MIT. I want to thank you very much for this presentation, Prime Minister, and especially for the hard work you've done for these months. I'm lucky to be part of the MIT Haiti initiative that you mentioned, led by Michel de Graaf. This group is a group of about 10 MIT people have gone down to Haiti, to Port-au-Prince 5 times, had 5 workshops with higher education faculty in Haiti. My own experience is it's been extremely rewarding experience with huge human potential waiting to be tapped, waiting to be released. It's been an extremely inspiring experience for me personally and shows a lot of hope for the future of education in Haiti. One of the aspects of this program is education in Creole. You mentioned this early in your talk, and I wonder if you could elaborate more on the importance of doing education in Creole at all levels in Haitian education.
I got into a lot of hot water for that while I was Prime Minister, but I always think that you have to govern from your heart. And from my heart, I really think that you need to teach the children in a language they understand. And there is no shame to it. The MIT Haiti initiative, I was talking to the dean, and first of all, I thanked him, and I thank MIT, and I thank Professor de Graaf, and I thank all of the members of the initiative for even daring to do and to go, and now I can say this because I'm no longer in the job, so I don't have the press coming down on me after the meeting, is to dare to do what others would not even think of doing, trying to push the boundaries, the limits. Because although we took our independence from France in 1804, all the laws are French-based and are written in French. Everything is French-derived. So where only 3% of the population speaks French, and 100% of the population speaks Creole. So to all of you that are not used to Haiti, you would say, but then you would think the education is in the language that everybody understands and speaks and relates to. Well, wrong. The education is in the language that a little minority of 3% speaks and relates to. So MIT is trying to change the paradigm and trying to go in uncharted territory. And MIT Haiti initiative is trying to do what seems obvious. Teach the children in the language they talk and understand. Teach the children in a language that their parents speak, friends speak, environment, everything. And get them out of this society-imposed system where they understand nothing. And at the end, we have simple numbers that prove that you are on the right path. And I pushed it very much when I was Prime Minister to have a curriculum in Creole, however, not abandoning the French, but teaching the French as a second language. So you learn in Creole, you learn your math, your science in Creole, but then you learn French as a second language, and it gives you a better chance to understand. So I cannot thank you enough for representing the voice of the voiceless, because I can promise you, all the children, they would want to understand. And the statistics show that when they learn in Creole, their native language, they get it at 60 words per minute. Versus when you go switch to the French, it's 20 words per minute. And then they learn by heart. They don't understand what they're learning. And soon after, the teachers that are teaching don't speak French really. So this is a recipe for lots of problems. But it comes from a social status, because the one who speaks French feels that there is a greater social status. But we're not saying to abandon the French and not to have the social status. That's not what this discussion is about. It's about learning in a language that you understand and also learning French. Like this, you benefit both ways. So this initiative, I encourage you to be patient, because this is a greater fight that you are engaged in without realizing, I'm sure. Because when you did the initiative, but I took a lot of criticism, and I'm sure I will take a lot of criticism for standing up for the Creole language. But the Creole language is the one that 100% of the population speaks. So I don't understand what the issue is about not embracing it. So the dean says that it's time to call it a day. And who am I to challenge the dean?